Shwmae, I'm thrilled to take part in this inspiring Festival of Hope, a global virtual poetry initiative by Siencyn with the National Poet of Wales, Ifor ap Glyn. My name's Lleucu Siencyn and I'm the Chief Executive of Literature Wales. Literature Wales is the national company for the development of literature, and our funders are the Arts Council of Wales and the Welsh Government. Our vision is one of hope. It's a Wales where literature empowers, improves and brightens lives. In this event, Ifor and I will discuss what hope, Gobaith, means to us in Wales and within the wider context of Europe, bilingualism and the current pandemic. The National Poet of Wales is one of our flagship projects at Literature Wales. It was established in 2005 as a cultural ambassador role which honours some of the most innovative and highly regarded writers from our country. The current National Poet of Wales is Ifor ap Glyn. He was born and bred in London to Welsh parents. He's a multi-award-winning poet, presenter, director and producer. He has twice won the crown at the National Eisteddfod and has won several BAFTA Cymru Awards for his work as a television director and presenter. Ifor has represented Wales in festivals and events around the world, including Cameroon, Lithuania, China, Belgium, Germany and Ireland, amongst many others. He has been commissioned to mark a number of special occasions over the past few years, including 50 years since the Aberfan tragedy, 20 years of development in Wales, social appeals, birthdays, and of course the highlights, the many highlights of the Welsh football team. Ifor, the National Poet of Wales role has taken you all around the world, and you've undertaken many commissions for significant and notable events and anniversaries. Why do you think poetry is such an important medium for this type of work? And what have been your highlights so far?
Well, here in Wales, of course, we're just one of many countries that have adopted this idea of a national poet or a poet laureate. Countries all over the world, from Scotland and Belgium to Canada and North Korea, who've made similar decisions. And indeed, there are also smaller areas and indeed specific interest groups who've also done something similar. I'm thinking in particular of the state laureates in America and some of the county laureates that are found in England. And I believe there's also a laureate for canals and a laureate for pets. But what they believe that speaking can be done perhaps more easily through the medium of poetry, but that poetry can access or tap into parts of our social experience where other media might falter slightly. So poetry can speak for us, but of course it's important that it also speaks to us. I think that must be the key to any successful laureateship. As to highlights, well, I could name a few. Some that spring to mind were reading to the inmates at HMP Berwyn, the largest prison in Europe, I believe. That was something of an experience. Also working with Syrian refugees who have now made their home in Bangor, which is not far from where I live here in Carnarvon. Also, a little further afield, it was quite memorable doing a reading in the Cameroonian capital of Yaoundé, but by the light of my cell phone, because there was a citywide power cut at the time. It was just as we began our performance. But if I had to choose one highlight, I think what I would choose would be an event at Big Ben, the big clock tower beside the Houses of Parliament in Westminster in London, where in 2016 one of my poems was chosen to be projected in massive letters on the side of the tower. Now, of course, I'm Welsh, but I was brought up in London, and so it was somehow tremendously empowering, tremendously uplifting to see the language that I spoke at home, given that status of appearing on one of the sort of iconic buildings of the English capital. in the heartland of the English language, as it were. But of course, we have to remember that London is a multicultural city, and Welsh is part of that multicultural weave. And I like to think that the appearance of the Welsh language on the side of Big Ben was also an acknowledgement of the fact that many of us here in Britain, as is the case, of course, across Europe, many of us, our mother tongues are not the first languages of the states in which we live. So it was nice to feel that this event gave us common cause with the Catalonians, the Frisians, the Sorbs, and the Friulians, and so on.
There are lots that connect us really through poetry. And what do you think in the context of hope, in the current global pandemic crisis, what role do creative people, poets, play in this crisis? And is there any way we can emerge from this stronger?
Well, one of the things this crisis has done has been to underline once more the difference between those of us who are perceived as essential workers and those of us who are perceived as non-essential workers. And of course it's right that we should give that status to the medics, the nurses, also the people who grow our food and retail it to us and deliver it to us. It's only right that they should be given that status. But that's nothing new. That's always been the case. What is new, or what is an unfortunate development in this particular crisis, is, of course, the collapse of the creative market, the collapse of business opportunities for creative people. And here in Wales, here in Britain, unfortunately, that comes, this new fallow period, as it were, comes on the back of many years of austerity and belt tightening that have seen successive cuts to arts funding. So, we're not in a position to live on our fat, as we say in Welsh. But as a recent article in a Welsh online publication stated, the value of art and culture that bring both illumination and escapism has never been more apparent. Well, that's very true. And also here in Wales, given the centralising tendency of the news from London, from the British media, the democratic deficit, as it's sometimes called here in Wales. Here in Wales, we also need an independent media more than ever before in order to tell our stories, to tell how we see the world from here. And artists and Welsh creatives have their part to play in the telling of those stories in their chosen media. Having said that, at risk of contradicting everything I've just said, I think we have to remember also it's a pandemic. It's not a productivity contest. And if we're able to frame these new and disturbing experiences now, very good, all to the good. However, if our creative responses will come later, that's okay too, and I'm sure they will.
I think that's a really important point. You keep hearing people not really joking, oh, I'll write my novel in this lockdown. But of course, most seriously creative people that I'm aware of and I've spoken to find this a disturbing time, and it's very difficult to be truly creative in these times. So, but to turn to the subject matter of hope, what do you think that particular word signifies for us here in particular?
Well, here in Wales, I think we're a hopeful nation, I hope. And I think we've had to be, because of course it's only recently that we've regained a measure of self-determination after 700 years and more, as in the dubious status of being England's first colony. So I think we are a hopeful nation. To give you one example of that, I think it's interesting that the word hope, or Gobaith in Welsh, that word Gobaith forms part of the title of our leading youth movement here in Wales, Urdd Gobaith Cymru. It's usually translated as the Welsh League of Youth, but it literally means the Welsh League of Hope. And of course, hope has to be a forward-looking thing. We have to, it's our children that are important in this context. And the Urdd has 56,000 members, I believe, and indeed its annual Eisteddfod, which is a cultural competitions which celebrate literature, music, dance, and so on. These attract annually more competitors than going to the Olympics, which is quite a feat.
The Urdd, as you say, quite rightly, is one of the many organisations here in Wales promoting the Welsh language, particularly amongst the future generations, the youth of Wales. Of course, right in Welsh primarily. Are you hopeful about the language?
Well, the Welsh language is currently spoken by around 20% of the population here in Wales, but it's growing. The language is on the increase in the more populous areas of the southeast. So I think there's cause for cautious optimism. If we look around the world at the 7,000 languages which are spoken in the world today, there's cause for hope, I suppose, in the fact that I think Welsh in that particular league table comes in somewhere, I think, around the top 500 spoken as it is by around 750,000 speakers, if we include all the people beyond our borders. But, of course, our children are hope for the language. I've done my bit for the language. I've brought up my children. I've taught them to speak Welsh, but the decision is now theirs. If they pass it on, there's hope. If they decide not to, well, that's their decision, and I hope I've brought them up not to do such a thing. Last year, to mark the UNESCO year of International Year of Indigenous Languages, our Welsh government asked me to write a poem to mark the Welsh launch of the year. And in the closing lines of the poem that I wrote, I said, "Yn y llafar y mae ei lleifer, a thafodau plant yw ei pharhad," which translates as, its verve comes from being voiced. The verve, the essence of the language comes from it being voiced, not from being written down. And on children's tongues, it will live on.
That's wonderful. And I think we're over that terrible period where people the correct way of speaking in Welsh that was superior. And it is delightful the way that Welsh is now used on all social media platform and in a fantastically diverse new generation. What about the Welsh word for hope, Gobaith? Is that a word, that you particularly like to use as a poet or as an individual?
Well, I certainly hope that I'm a hopeful writer, but I have to admit it's not a word that I use all that often, which is a shame in some ways, because there are lots of lovely phrases containing the word Gobaith or hope in Welsh. Mein Gobaith is a hope stone. That's a phrase used to describe a waymarker on the mountain that will guide you on your way as the light deteriorates due to fog or night coming in or whatever. It gives you hope that you will in fact reach the end of your path. Gobaith magu, the hope of rearing, is another rather delicate way of describing somebody who's in the family way, somebody who's pregnant. And the word Gobaith also appears in a number of our place names. There's a Bryn Gobaith about 70 miles away from here in northeast Wales. There's Drws Gobaith. Bryn Gobaith is the Hill of Hope. Drws Gobaith is the Door of Hope. That's down in southwest Wales. And there's even a Tir Gobaith in Argentina, the land of hope. Some of the Welsh settlers who went there in the 19th century also took some of our names with them. When hope is lacking, we might say in Welsh, does dim gobaith canary. There's not a canary's hope, which is I suppose, a reference to our mining heritage, and a reference to the fact that miners would take canaries, caged birds, down into the pit with them in order to check for the presence of poisonous gases. We also might say sometimes, "Dim gobaith mil mewn Grand National." You don't have a donkey's hope in the Grand National, which of course is one of the premier horse races here in Britain.
And Gobaith seems to come up in a number of names of organisations here in Wales. It's a very loaded word in many ways.
Well, it is. It seems to be a popular choice of popular element in when different organisations come to choose names for themselves. I'm thinking in particular of some religious organisations. The Gobaith Morn is a youth organisation, a Welsh religious youth organisation. There's up until relatively recently, we used to have the Gobaith, or the Band of Hope, which was a religious movement to try and instruct children in the dangers of drink. My wife used to be a member of the Gobaith, the Band of Hope. But it's not just exclusively the preserve of religious organisations. There's also Gobaith Cymru FC, or I'll come back to them in a minute. Let's see, there's T Gobaith in North Wales, is a hospice for children with terminal illnesses. There's a T Gobaith as well in Cardiff, providing comfort for the homeless. And Gobaith Cymru FC, one of my favourites. They're a football team, a charity football team, who raise funds and raise awareness regarding organ transplants, and indeed some of their players are transplantees or people who have received organs. So yeah, I think the word Gobaith is a potent one here in Wales.
So how about Gobaith hope here in the literature of Wales?
Well, I think the future's bright. Of course, we have to measure our literature in this context looking forward, and I'm glad to say that we're blessed with a number of accomplished young writers here in Wales. To give you one example, in the field of traditional Welsh poetry, when I was growing up in the 1970s, there were serious concerns that this complex system of alliteration and internal rhyme that has been in its present form for at least 700 years and has its roots going back to the very beginnings of Welsh poetry 1500 years ago. There were real fears that this might be sort of beginning to crumble and come to an end. But then it had a revival then in the 70s, and again now, and indeed some of the most accomplished practitioners of this demanding form are men and women in their 20s and 30s. So that certainly gives us cause for hope. It's also gratifying to see our writers, both young and old, embracing opportunities to present their work beyond our borders. And of course, we have to thank Versopolis amongst other organisations for some of these opportunities, because I think it's paramount that our links with the literatures and cultures of Europe continue, whatever else may happen politically in the land in which we live.
Exactly, I couldn't agree more. So you're going to close today with a poem that has its genesis in one of these European collaborations.
Indeed, in 2018, I was invited to participate in, Poetinis Druskininkų Ruduo, the annual poetry festival that's held in Druskininki. Well, it's held in Lithuania. Most of the events are in Druskininki, but some of them are also in the capital, Vilnius. Now, Druskininki is a beautiful spa town, and the festival, of course, is one of the I think it's 15 festivals that are a part of the Versopolis platform. Now, one of the many highlights of this festival for me when I attended 2 years ago was the fountain. that can be found in the middle of the square in Druskininki. And it's no ordinary fountain because it's linked to a jukebox. And this fountain will play anything from Mozart to Freddie Mercury to the latest hits from Lithuanian pop artists. You put your money in, you choose your song, and then the fountain will move, will gush and spurt in time to the music. And at night, it's also lit up with colors that also change in time to the music. So it was a magical moment, and I felt that this was the fountain and the festival in Druskininki deserved a small thank you for this moment of magic. I'll read it in Welsh first and then the English translation. Ffynnon Druskininki. Yma mae'r dŵr yn canu. Daw drwsga'r gerdd ar dafod nid o'r dyfroedd bywiol megis cynt, ond o'r ffynnon hyfryd hon, sy'n pistillio lliwiau'r nos ei seithyn ganffrwd I guriad unrhyw gerddor. Ac heno, rhof fy llaw drwy'r cincia byw, caflasur dafna'r alaw ar bob bys. Yma mae'r dŵr yn canu. Here, the water sings. The rhymes that season our tongues come not from the spars of time past, but from this finest fountain that gushes colours in the dark, spouting hundredfold jets to any minstrel's beat. I run my hand through its living spouts tonight and taste the tune drops on each finger. Here, the water sings.
Diolch yn fawr iawn. Thank you so much for that. And I hope others have enjoyed this session as much as me. And thank you to the Global Virtual Poetry Initiative by Persepolis for this wonderful invitation. Diolch yn fawr iawn.